Hi, Hunter Hastings here. Today we'll learn about a new way of running companies of any size and any type. The system is called Kinetic Flow State Organizations, or KFSOs. It's a new system for running agile operations, rapid growth, and high profitability. Three things. There's no management, no supervision, no layers, no structure. These are replaced by a system of flow, the flow of knowledge, the flow of ideas, the flow of experimentation. And when everybody in the company combines autonomy with know-how, they too get into flow, an intense commitment that produces the best outcomes. We're going to hear from Mark Beliczky, an experienced CEO at multiple scales, a seasoned private equity executive who knows a lot about operations, and a leadership consultant who's guided innumerable businesses to success from a lot of different starting points.
This is the Value Creators Podcast, your source for a new kind of business education, escaping from business administration mode and entering dynamic entrepreneurship mode. We're guided by entrepreneurial economics, which is the source of all growth and positive change for businesses of all sizes in all markets. We talk to experienced experts in value creation so that there's business learning for you in every episode.
Mark, welcome to the Value Creators Podcast.
Welcome, Hunter. Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Well, business organization is our subject today. It's the new frontier in innovation, because in the new world, all firms are going to have access to AI and data centers and the internet, to business school graduates and to all of the components to build the company. But it's the design of the organization to create value for customers out of those components, which is the key variable. And it's becoming more and more pivotal. You've been thinking deeply about this subject for a long time. You've written a lot about it. You've got experience as a CEO and a private equity executive, as a consultant. And you say that we need a new way of organizing for the 21st century, a new organizational model, to quote one of your articles, which I know I've been lucky enough to help you with some of the research on that. So let's get that visible. But let's start with the old model, Mark. What is the old paradigm that we're talking about, and what's wrong with it?
Sure, thank you. Well, the old model is what we call a business legacy model. It's really built for stability, not change. Traditional organizations prioritize control and predictability and efficiency. They were ideal for an industrialized era, when things were not moving fast and the business landscape was a little bit static. But, here are the challenges. This centralized management slows down the process. Hierarchies create bottlenecks. There are silos that kill innovation oftentimes, and you have departments where things slow down. You have rigid roles and bureaucratic processes that really stifle engagement amongst many people in the teams. And there's generally a failure to adapt, which leads to decline. So most of these organizations, these legacy organizations, struggle to compete in a really fast-moving competitive environment.
So let's just go there and highlight how the environment has changed. You talked about speed, for example. I've done a lot of research into the Industrial Revolution back in the 19th century, and you think about how slow it took letters to arrive and before the telegraph, or how long it took to take a train across the continent, all of those kinds of things. It wasn't as slow as speed, but a lot of other things have changed too. What are the most important changes in context?
Sure. I think, obviously markets are evolving very fast. So digital disruption, AI, customer demands require, more companies to be more iterative and pivot and innovate constantly. You have globalization, which increases complexity in organizations in a very dramatic way. So organizations really need to be flexible structures to manage diverse teams and remote workforces and rapid market shifts. I have two more points. Customer expectations and with regard to real-time responsiveness. Companies are not able to keep up with the current demands of the current customers today. They want things now, they want things yesterday, and we have to be highly responsive. And the old legacy model just can't compete with that. And the last point is that workforces have really changed. Top talent really wants autonomy, purpose, meaningful work. They're really not looking for rigid job descriptions and bureaucratic oversight. So large number of mismatches.
Yeah, and the language, you can tell, comes from the past. We still talk about the labor force and those kinds of things, which they're industrial revolution kinds of ideas. So let's move on to the new concept that you've been thinking about. It's called KFSO, Kinetic Flow State Organization, and we'll go into the core elements of that, Mark. But paint a picture for us, if you would, of what this new organization looks like that's so different from the paradigm of the past.
Sure, thank you. So we use some fancy words, but kinetics is just motion, momentum, giving organizations momentum and motion, and having that organization have the unique ability to see barriers, predict barriers, remove barriers, navigate barriers. And then the other key component of the Kinetic Flow State Organization is flow, which is the free flow of information, of people, of ideas, of creativity, of innovation, and allowing those to happen in real time in a really fast pace where people are working in a very dynamic fashion. So a momentum-based flowing source of information, and we're also value creation flows as well. So that's kind of a general overview of what this new 21st century model of organizations is all about.
Should we think of it as a networked organization as opposed to a typical hierarchical one? Is that a good mental model?
That's exactly what it is. If you think about that, it is highly networked, maybe hardly any levels, flatter organization where it's quite dynamic, and I think the key word too that comes in here is freedom. There's a lot of freedom of movement and ideas that are also able to flow within the organization.
Yeah, I love that, because the old model certainly didn't want freedom. It wanted control, it wanted authority, it wanted people to do what they were told. So that is a big difference. So let's try to break it into its component parts, even though we always recognize it's a whole, not a collection of parts. Kinetics. So you said that's movement and momentum. Let's go a little bit deeper into that. How can a business organization be kinetic?
Sure. So let's start with our physics days, right? Let's revisit Newton's first law of motion. An object in motion stays in motion. An object at rest stays at rest unless acted upon by an external force. So kinetics really represents an organization's ability to remain in continuous motion constantly. And this is key: adapting, evolving, being responsive to internal and external stimuli. Kinetics really ensures that the organization doesn't remain static or rigid like the old legacy models, but really, and I think this is key too, which allows it to pivot, evolve, and grow in a very significant dynamic market conditions. So you have to address customer needs and technological shifts. And then what is kinetics in a business organization? It's, again, continuous motion is key, or what we call a kinetic flow state. And it's not just about reacting, but it's shaping the future, actually. It's not reactive, it's proactive in how it's designed as an organization. It anticipates and leads change. There's a lot of decentralized decision-making that helps to accelerate the responsiveness. So instead of waiting for approval, teams really act in real time where knowledge is most relevant, and they can move forward. It's a culture of continuous learning and experimentation. Success is really about iterating, improving, and adapting dynamically. And failure to embrace kinetics will really lead to stagnation on a lot of organizations' parts. So, which is slow decision making and disengaged teams. We'll talk about engagement later, hopefully. And then they're losing ground, to more adaptable competitors out there. So you would ask, why have businesses resisted kinetics? Well, these legacy structures prioritize stability and movement. And traditional models optimize for predictability and control, but not adaptability. So hierarchies, job descriptions, and silos are designed for lasting, relevance. But in themselves, they're pretty inefficient and they're not evolutionary. And really, the KFSO is more evolutionary. In these traditional organizations, change feels risky, but staying static is riskier. So that's a challenge. The real danger is being left behind, which I think many will be.
Yeah, I was making some notes myself about the language of rigidity and avoiding kinetics. So executing your job description right here, the bullet points that you have to adhere to, making your numbers. So you got to stay in that particular lane, and the direct reports and all of those kinds of things. They're anti-kinetic.
Yes.
So that's one mind-opening concept. Let's get to the flow state. And as I understand it, Mark, we've got two components. Maybe I might call it a macro level and a micro level, which integrate, but there's kind of two different kinds of flow. Did I get that right? Please talk about flow.
Did.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So one of the things that we look at in flow is the ability to remove obstacles, which I think is important and critical. Flow is really about barrier identification and removal and barrier navigation. So for a KFSO, I know it doesn't roll off our tongues neatly, but the Kinetic Flow State Organization, flow is the lifeblood, and without it, decision-making slows down and innovation stalls, and frankly, adaptability suffers. So obstacles exist at every level, at the structural, procedural, cultural, and technological levels. So the key thing is that elimination isn't enough. Organizations really have to redesign their systems to promote continuous movement in their organization. I can talk about the barriers to flow if that's of interest.
Yeah, please do. One of the images that comes to mind is we always talk about business building. We're building a business. It's solid and it's brick by brick and put together in that order. And that's no doubt important, but your concept of removal, the smart thing to do is not build, it's to remove so that flow can maximize its energy. So yeah, please do talk about removal.
Sure. So we have structural obstacles when we deal with flow, which are hierarchical bottlenecks. I think hierarchy for the most part is bottlenecks. So the obstacle is rigid hierarchies that force decisions to funnel through senior leadership and delays, and it cause inefficiencies. So the solution is flatten the decision-making process by providing freedom for teams so that things can flow in all organizations. There's this shift, and it's really important, from command and control to distributed leadership, where basically authority lives with those that are closest to the action. I do want to bring up the United States Marine Corps, and they're trained to improvise, adapt, and overcome any obstacle in whatever situation that is needed. This is what they're trained to do, to the smallest unit to larger units. So we all have plans when they go into battle, but the plans are thrown out as soon as they're in a market situation because it's quite dynamic. Mm-hmm. So I think that's important to talk about. There's procedural obstacles, which we call bureaucratic drag. Unnecessary approvals, excessive reporting, redundant meetings. We should talk about meetings. I know you talk about meetings a lot. So the solution is lean decision-making frameworks, clarifying decision rights, who has the decision, who decides it, what, when, and how, adopt to agile governance, which is remove unnecessary gatekeeping to speed up progress. Those are keys. There are cultural obstacles, which is the fear of failure and risk aversion, which is pretty big. So the obstacle is traditional organizations punish mistakes. They discourage innovation and experimentation. But the solution is shift to what we call these days, Amy Edmondson talks about this in her research, psychological safe environments, where failure really is seen as a key learning and not a punishment. So here we encourage iterative test and learn approaches to businesses. The fourth point is technological obstacles, which is siloed knowledge and outdated systems. You have data, insights, and expertise, which are trapped in these departments, limiting real-time collaboration. So the solution is knowledge-sharing platforms that integrate cross-functional, insights. What this does is this really enables real-time collaborative work that's going on with all the teams, and you get instant access to information. It's not lagging. So the fifth point is legacy mental models, which are fixed roles and rigid job descriptions. And the obstacle really is team members are confined to static roles, preventing agility and cross-functional collaboration. And the solution is shift to capability-based talent models, where they're more dynamic and they evolve with the business. So you encourage this cross-functional movement and skill development to maximize adaptability within your organization. So the guiding principle is removing friction is an ongoing commitment. Organizations have to constantly audit, and eliminate barriers. We're increasing autonomy, and adaptability is going to be key. And the businesses that don't remove barriers, they're going to fall behind, very frankly. And, in a rapidly changing world where speed, fluidity determine competitive advantage. And again, legacy sort of organizations with bureaucracies and hierarchies are not very fluid, and it makes it difficult for them to compete in a very fast-paced marketplace.
And we've also discovered that with all of those practical guidelines that you've provided, Mark, we've also found that systems theory helps us here too, because you and I both talked to Dr. Adrian Bijan, Professor Adrian Bijan, and he talks about flow and systems, and all the successful systems find ways to increase the flow of the energy, and we're using the term knowledge for energy, that runs through them. So this is system science as well as practical management, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, there are a number of points, techniques to drive flow. Any interest in talking about those?
Yeah, please.
Sure. So there's 6. If you bear with me, I'll kind of go through the 6. One is autonomy and purpose. People really thrive in organizations when they can control their work but stay connected to a shared mission. I think that's important. Freedom for teams is vital. Making decisions on tasks and methods and problem-solving approaches. They define what needs to be achieved, not how. So this really reduces micromanagement and increases ownership. Mm-hmm. The second point is challenge skill balance. So flow happens when work really is engaging, but not overwhelming. So you assign stretch projects, you push individuals beyond their comfort zone, but without causing anxiety. So you encourage progressive mastery in these organizations where skills grow continuously on a regular basis and all team members get engaged. The third point is instant and meaningful feedback loops, which are vital. You and I have talked about this. You're getting feedback, you're doing after action reports. Flow requires real-time course correction. You don't wait till next week or the week after or the month after, or you don't have an annual review. You replace outdated annual reviews with frequent real-time feedback. In my role as a CEO, I met with all my direct reports once a week for 15 minutes to see what was going on. Once every 2 weeks for a deeper dive, 30-minute. Once a month for a 1 hour, how am I doing? What can I do to help? What barriers do you have in place? How can I help you develop your professional plan? So real-time information and work with teams is really important. And a fourth point is eliminating distractions and what we call cognitive overload. So you minimize interruptions, which means you reduce unnecessary meetings and emails and notifications. You create, one of my favorite things is flow zones. So dedicated deep work time for individuals and teams. I know you and I do this. When I'm working on projects, I carve out blocks of time. I don't do any other sort of work, check my phone, check my email. I try to get into a state of flow where I can focus on that work. Also, the use of what we call asynchronous tools. So teams don't feel pressured to respond instantly to messaging, which I talked about. Psychological safety and a risk-taking culture are vital. I talked a little bit about that. People can't enter flow if they fear judgment or failure. So you create this safe environment. So they're experimenting and encouraging where mistakes are made, and they're learning and seeing these as learning opportunities. And then we do something called normative iterative learning, which is small failures, refined strategies, and drive innovation, allowing for that culture to happen. And then another way to make this successful is cross-functional collaboration for collective flow. And my experience in large organizations is you have these silos, but flow isn't about the individual just. It happens at the team level too. So you have to encourage team flow rituals like stand-up meetings, hackathons, deep dive problem solvings. I was with a client 2 weeks ago in New York City, and what I realized that the team never had a stand-up meeting in the morning. They weren't really talking about lessons learned from the day before, what they were facing the day ahead, and understanding their questions, comments, suggestions, and feedback. When you add those into how the business operates on a real-time basis, there's a lot of traction that can occur real-time, and you're not waiting for a long period of time. And then there's also, the last point is the use of rotating leadership models, which is you let leadership emerge based on expertise, not on hierarchy. So I'll stop there.
No, we'll compile that into a 6-point list and we'll publish it so that people can benefit from that. Thank you, Mark. So I'm going to be the theorist here for a little while. So we talked about the system level flow at the macro kind of state, and you've been talking about the personal and team level flow. I'm going to try and say that name that we all struggle with, which is Professor Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. I got close.
Right.
He wrote the whole psychology of flow in a number of books we can find. I'll link to some on the show notes. But it's what he called positive psychology. It's what motivates people, as you say. It gives them purpose. It gives them drive. So how do you bring those two together? How do you put the micro and the macro together and create the flow state organization, which is the core of your idea?
Sure. And thank you. I'm a Hungarian, so I should be able to say his name really easy.
Say it better.
Holly, and you did an excellent job. So thank you very much. Why knowledge flow, in most organizations is a strategic asset. What's important is that at KFSOs, we talked about it, knowledge is the fuel that drives decision-making, innovation, and value. And that's what, he talks about, getting in this state where people can share ideas and move forward very quickly. It's just not about moving information. It's about channeling it into what we call, and you probably like this, value-producing streams. So you're using flow to create these value-producing streams within an organization where people have the freedom to work really hard, share their ideas, and then create these streams of, value, which are really important. So without strong knowledge, and it's a knowledge flow, also organizations become slow. And within KFSO, there's different kinds of flow. There's explicit knowledge flow, which is structured information. So data, reports, best practices, documented processes. This really helps to maintain clarity and efficiency. Then there's this tacit knowledge flow, which is experience-based insights. And you and I have spoken about this, which is informed learning, from human interactions, from mentorships, from collaboration. This is like real-time engagement with people who work together. This really is the crux of what we're trying to work on. It drives creativity and problem solving and, deep expertise transfer with each other, sharing ideas. It's really important. And then there's real-time knowledge flow, which is what we call immediate actionable insights, which is really, and I know this is near and dear to your heart, customer feedback, market signals, performance analytics, getting to that point of zero distance between that person, that team member, and the customer. This allows organizations to adapt instantly rather than waiting for periodic reviews and getting feedback. So it's important. And there are ways to capture and channel knowledge for maximum input as well. So you have decentralized decision making, which is how do we get there? We had fluid cross-functional collaboration. You actually speak with each other's group. I've worked in private equity and other organizations where the left and the right didn't know what they were doing. You stayed in your lane. So staying in your lane is quite dangerous. Feedback loops and continuous learning, those are vital for flow. You have real-time mechanism, which is customer insights, agile retrospectives that help. You create this learning culture that encourages constant iteration and adaptation. And I know you like the word evolution, so that's important too. And then there's this technology of knowledge flow as an enabler point of view. You have digital platforms now that allow instant information and sharing of decision making. We're removing outdated IT bottlenecks, which accelerate competitive advantage. And then there's this really important thing, which is cultural reinforcement of knowledge sharing. Leaders can reward transparency, which I think is vital, and discourage knowledge hoarding. I've seen it time and time again. Knowledge hoarding. I have the power. I have the knowledge. But that doesn't really work in modern organizations in the 21st century. And then there's this open communication, which becomes the norm, not the exception. So I think that's critical as well. So the key takeaway is that it's knowledge activation, not just knowledge flow. KFSOs don't just move knowledge, they refine it, they shape it, they apply it, for a real impact in the organization. The insights turn into actions, and these drive innovation and adaptability and execution, which I think is what we're trying to accomplish for modern businesses. Most competitive companies are the ones that can learn, apply, and evolve fastest. And that's really the heart of a KFSO. Learn, apply, and evolve in a very fast fashion.
We're delighted to announce the Value Creators online course. For entrepreneurs in every kind of business, big, small, or medium, at every stage, in every industry, our course provides the foundations and principles on which to build success. Simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to creativity, innovation, and competitively superior business action. There are 11 foundational principles or mental models that together cohere into the value business model. Principles for value generation, principles for value operations, principles for value finance and accounting, and principles for value sustainability, as well as the new knowledge accumulation you'll need for continuous innovation. These principles are delivered by top business professors from top business schools: Mark Packard, Per Byland, Gordon Miller, David Rapp, and Bart Vanderhagen. You'll find video lessons from them, along with downloadable tools, processes, and other valuable content. Master these lessons, and you'll master the most important skill in business: value creation. Go to thevaluecreators.com and click the course link.
Yeah,
the other point that stems from what you're saying is that this knowledge flow is multi-directional at all times. So, we think of a river flowing, but that's unidirectional. But we've got the knowledge coming from the customer. It's got to come into the company. It's got to go into all the internal tributaries. Then it's got to turn around as innovation or new ideas or change, and then it's got to be reintegrated. It's got to go back to the customer. So the flow is woven rather than being linear, right? It's non-linear.
Yeah, absolutely. It's multidimensional, and when everyone flows, and you're dealing with the barriers, and you eliminate the barriers, then some things happen in a very fast pace, and your customers will be quite impressed, and so will your stakeholders.
So we've got the benefits of knowledge flow. You've mentioned agility. Is that fostered by the knowledge flow? Does that make us more agile?
Yeah, it really does. I wanted to kind of make a couple points about just the benefits of
Mm-hmm.
kinetic flow state organizations too, and I'll move through these fast. So, faster decision making, greater organizational agility. We've talked about that. Stronger innovation capabilities, higher team member engagement and flow, seamless knowledge sharing. I'm trying to keep going through my list. Improve customer responsiveness. So, the list is rather amazing, and the key takeaway is continue to thrive as best that we can thrive in an organization.
Yeah, it's certainly multiple benefits. Another one that you have written about is alignment. And I just want to make sure that we understand that well, because it sounds a bit counterintuitive. We've got these multiple flows and multi directions of knowledge. We've got change. We've got these self energizing teams that are working on the projects. Where does the alignment come from, and how do we make sure that we keep everybody aligned when they're moving in all these directions?
Yeah, right. So this is one of my most favorite topics, which is organizational alignment. And so within a kinetic flow state organization, alignment is not control. It's a unifying force for an organization. So traditional alignment equals, this is like a math equation, traditional alignment in traditional organization equals rigid control and top-down mandates. But in a kinetic flow state organization, alignment equals shared direction that guides decentralized teams, rapid innovation, and continuous adaptation. It's about freedom within a framework, and I love that phrase, freedom within a framework. And it's okay to have a framework, but we have freedom within that framework that's flowing. Teams move fast, but they're in sync with a bigger mission. And so how does alignment work in a KFSO? Well, it's about a shared purpose, not just a shared process. Alignment comes from a clear mission that everyone understands and believes in. Teams operate autonomously, which I think is another key point that is really important. They operate autonomously within a drifting set of, without drifting from strategic goals. It's principles over prescriptions, which is a key difference too. Instead of rigid rules, alignment comes from core principles that guide decision making, honestly. And really, this allows flexibility, ensuring that there's innovation and they stay true to the company's purpose and values, which I think are vital. What we see is that there's this dynamic coordination, not fixed structures, which is really a distinction. Traditional organizations enforce alignment through hierarchy and bureaucracy. But in KFSOs, alignment comes through real-time knowledge flow and transparency and cross-functional collaboration, as you talked about. So we go from autonomy to connectivity. Teams operate independently, but stay connected through this continuous feedback and shared intelligence. So alignment is maintained through trust, through visibility, through open communication, not micromanagement. And why alignment is critical in fast-moving organization? It prevents fragmentation. It speeds up decision-making. It strengthens the culture and engagement. People take greater ownership when they understand the why, which is an important question. And it ensures rapid change that still serves a long-term goal. So agility is valuable only if it's aligned with the strategy of the organization. And if you don't mind, I'm going to share some statistics with you.
Yeah, please do.
Alignment. So interesting. Only 14% of team members, and I'm kind of going through my notes here because I can't remember all this, but 14% of team members comprehend their company strategy. That's a challenge. only 40% of projects, or rather about 40% of projects, fail due to poor alignment. The Gallup research shows that 10% improvement in a team member connection with a mission or a purpose leads to a 1.8% decrease in turnover and a 4.1% increase in profitability. In companies with robust mission statements, 63% of teams feel motivated versus 31% in companies without a clear mission statement. And the last point is companies with well-defined mission statements and alignment see over 90% achievement of growth and profits that meet or surpass their industry standards. So the data is on the side of alignment, and it's rather compelling, frankly.
Yeah, that's very powerful. Can you share those with us and we'll publish them, Mark?
Yes, I will.
Good, thank you. So another word that you've mentioned, and I think it's slightly different from alignment, is engagement. And I don't have the data in front of me, maybe you do, but I know Gallup publishes a poll regularly about the levels of engagement of employees in companies, and it's declining to quite low levels, and that is deemed to lead to low productivity and a lot of the problems that we have today. So talk to us about engagement and how that fits into the KFSO vision.
Yeah, so it's rather interesting and sad that the level of engagement, and I'm going to give you the real definition of engagement. We all talk about it, and I'll refer to my notes. So engagement is a team member's active psychological, emotional, and behavioral connection to their work and organization, which drives their effort, alignment, and success. So here's the recent data as of 2024. 23% of team members are engaged worldwide. 23%. So less than 7 out of 10 people at work are engaged. So hard to move a business forward. In the United States and Canada, it's a little bit better, 33%. So when I look at engagement, engagement isn't a nice to have. It's really essential for agility and alignment and innovation. Traditional organizations struggle with disengagement because of bureaucracy, rigid structures, and lack of autonomy. So KFSOs create an environment where people feel deeply involved, which is really important. They're motivated and they're committed to work. And so in a KFSO, how do they drive engagement? Well, there are a couple key points, and I'll go through these. Autonomy and ownership over work. People are engaged really when they have control over their work rather than being micromanaged, which is the typical model. Rigid job descriptions are replaced with dynamic, roles in organizations that evolve based on skills and interest in the business needs. Second point is work that feels meaningful to people. People are more engaged when their work contributes to something bigger. KFSOs maintain a clear mission-driven focus so that, frankly, every team member understands why they are making the contributions that matter. Flow and deep work environments are key. So distractions, unnecessary meetings, and bureaucratic slowdowns kill engagement. So that old sort of structure is really holding people back. KFOs optimize for deep focus and creativity and flow by eliminating low-value tasks and fostering this is what we call this uninterrupted work session. So real-time feedback is, we've talked about that already, which is really key. Continuous learning and growth, people disengage when they feel stagnant. KFOs encourage, skill development and experimentation and lateral moves to keep everyone growing and energized. A culture of psychological safety, we've talked about, and innovation is key. What we do know is that engagement dies in fear-based cultures. And a lot of the old cultures are pretty much fear-based. KFOs create cultures of trust, which is really significant, where failure is seen as a learning opportunity and not a career risk. And then there's cross-functional collaboration and community. Isolation leads to disengagement. In KFSOs, they break silos down and encourage collaboration and makes for a really dynamic work environment that's socially fulfilling for everybody. So here's the business case for engagement. Higher
Yeah.
productivity. Engaged employees are 147% more productive than disengaged ones. Pretty phenomenal. Lower turnover rate, greater innovation, better customer satisfaction. All very powerful metrics when it comes to engagement and the value of that, and particularly how KFSOs drive engagement and performance.
So let me just play the skeptic, Mark, and I'm sure you've been through this with your clients. So all this autonomy and freedom that you're talking about, it sounds good, but hey, it's pretty scary. How the hell are we going to run this thing? How are we going to keep it pointed in the right direction? How are we going to make our numbers? How are we going to do all of the elements of control that we feel we need to? I don't see how this is going to work for my corporation. How do you address that skeptic?
Yeah, I think one of the key areas to think about is the role of leadership and the role that leadership will play in KFSO. And it's a different kind of model when you think about, what happens in an organization. Here's something that's really rather compelling in the recent Gallup research is that 70% of leaders in organizations are okay or poor. And 70% of engagement within organizations is directly attributable to the leader. So the challenge becomes, how you're leading within an organization. So within a Kinetic Flow State organization, it's about, the leadership that might be there. And it's shifting from command to enablement. And I think that's when I deal with my clients and talk to people, it's an environment of enablement. KFSOs, they don't rely on hero leaders or top-down authority figures. Dynamic leadership really is about, tuning the system so that leadership's in the marketplace and where it's real to the customer emerges when and where it's needed. The goal isn't to have, a few exceptional leaders in an organization at the top. It's really to create an environment where excellent people can operate at their best. And I think that's what's critical. So, it's important that, leadership, at least in KFSO, is situational, not positional. Titles don't define leadership, expertise and context do. The best person for the moment leads at that time, and it's different. Then they step back when their expertise is no longer needed. Leaders are enablers, not controllers. You have dynamic leaders focus on removing barriers and facilitating knowledge flow. You have distributed authority. How about that for a new idea? Not centralized power in organization. And in leadership, again, we talked about that, emerges. It's not assigned. And then leaders focus on systems, not individual heroics. So there are a number of different ways where leadership comes into play, that when you change leadership and use dynamic leadership, you start to see changes in organizations.
Yeah, that's helpful. Listeners know I'm very skeptical about the concept of leadership because I think it's a constructed idea out of the business schools and they make a lot of money selling it. But you talking about distributed leadership, I like that idea, and dynamic leadership, that it changes with the situation, changes with the context. And everybody would look up to the right person at the right time who's got the right knowledge for that situation.
Exactly.
So how are we going to get there? Mark, you've working there out there in the marketplace with your clients. Are they going to shift to this in some dramatic change? Are they going to get there gradually? Are they going to start KFSO experiments in one division? How do you see the KFSO growing as a influence in the market?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I've had a number of conversations with a number of people about that. This is not going to happen overnight. It is a transformation. It's going to unfold in waves, and I look at it as a wave. Some companies will lead, others will adapt slowly, and some will become obsolete. They just won't be able to make the change. You're going to have market forces and competition that will necessitate, and determine, the pace of adoption in the marketplace. And the key question is, will businesses proactively evolve, or will they be forced to change? So who moves first? And, I'll talk a little bit about that. You're going to have pioneers and market leaders. Some companies already operate in a KFSO, using some of these principles. They may not label it that way, but some examples are, let's say, Spotify, Tesla, Morningstar. All have redefined organizational structures in their businesses, prioritizing autonomy and agility and knowledge flow. So it's kind of happening already. New firms will move faster, very frankly. So you have startups and digital native firms don't have legacy structures that they have to dismantle. So they can bake KFSO principles into their DNA. On day one, they can start that way.
Yeah.
You have established firms that can transform, if they're willing. So larger organizations can transition, but they have to break through hierarchies and, culminate and eliminate the bureaucratic friction that's out there. But here's a great example: Microsoft under Satya Nadella. It's a $245 billion company. They shifted from rigid silos to decentralized decision-making and a culture of continuous learning. It can happen. I mean, it's a pretty big organization. You're going to see some gradual shift versus broad adoption, I would think. Gradual adoption is most industries will transition slowly, testing the elements, see what happens. Companies are going to start, with small experiments and before expanding the model, in the organization. I did that 15, 20 years ago, small experiments in this and self-directed work teams. You'll see a broad shift over time, shift, or what I like to call a swerve in the marketplace. As competition, really rewards adaptability, KFSO principles will become the standard. I think it will be the standard. Much like agile and lean methodologies really revolutionize management, KFOs will really redefine organizational structures. And there are a number of pathways to get there. There's start small, scale fast. There's remove bureaucratic bottlenecks. There's shift the mindsets, and that's so important. Shifting mindsets, not just structures. You have to have cultural change, which is critical. Organizations will need to rethink leadership and collaboration, decision making. It's just not about reworking the org chart. It's really about changing how people operate. It's leveraging technology to enable knowledge flow, AI, real-time data platforms, digital collaboration, all of these things that will facilitate instant knowledge flow. Technology becomes the backbone of agility and decentralized decision-making. So key takeaways for, how to drive KFSOs and adaptive organizations. The shift will begin with pioneers. Startups will have an advantage established, as a new startup. The ultimate question is, will organizations evolve by choice, or will they be forced to adapt, possibly when it's too late?
Yeah, I'm a little bit nervous about whether major companies can make that shift. But I think one additional thing that will happen, or just an example of what you said, is when we see a KFSO bring an outstanding innovation to the marketplace that nobody else could do, people will look at the organization that did that. And I wrote a Substack about DeepSeek, the new AI company in China. And the big news was about the technology. But in fact, when you look at how they're organized, they're a KFSO. There's no managers, no management, no layers, no titles. There's no plan. There's no allocation of resources. The best idea gets supported. It's exploratory. And they came up with an AI innovation that the American big companies couldn't come up with. And Tesla is another one, SpaceX, catching a rocket out of the sky. That takes a KFSO to do that, I think. So
no, it does. And, so I think, they are leading the way. DeepSeek is, a great example about NVIDIA, right? Mm-hmm. Rapid innovation cycles, fluid organizational structure, the CEO, Jensen Huang, he fosters a culture of cross-functional collaboration, real-time knowledge sharing. How about that? It's kind of KFSO-like. Customer-driven evolution, which is really key. The higher organization, leading appliance manufacturer based in China, decentralized learning. I'll share a little bit of stats, and I just looked this up today. So GE is now a higher company, effective 2016. And this is interesting. Pre-acquisition, GE was a $5.9 billion business. By 2024, and they were acquired in 2016, by 2024, they're an $11 billion business. Their market share moved from 17.4% to 28%.
Wow.
So
that's GE Appliances.
GE Appliance, right. Yeah. So no rigid hierarchy, independent but interconnected, self-managed teams. Teams act as entrepreneurs. You mentioned Tesla, Morningstar, the tomato manufacturing company. They're around. They've been around a long time. They've been using this model for a long time. No formal managers, no managers, fluid decision making. They operate without rigid reporting structures. And then you have a few other examples. Handu in China, flexible, agile commerce firm with decentralized teams. Favi in France, industrial manufacturing firm with completely self-managed workforce. You have Buurtzorg, which is Netherlands, based in the Netherlands, a decentralized healthcare company providing, nursing care that are completely managed by nurses, where decisions are made, and they have better patient outcomes and better cost efficiencies. So there are a number of examples where this is happening, some in bits and pieces, some in whole, but it's very promising to see great progress, and even by very large organizations.
Well, that's exciting that it's starting to emerge in the world and everywhere. It sounds like the number of international companies you've cited. Are you seeing this in academia anywhere? Is anybody teaching it? Are you seeing it in the papers that we sometimes read?
I am seeing information about concepts, but no one's really teaching this from what I've seen, or the papers that I've reviewed. So
I get the same impression too.
Yeah, if you look at a business school, even Stanford or Harvard or the other schools or whatever it might be, I have not seen it as something that's being taught, where freedom, flow, and autonomy are driving forces within an organization. It surprises me, but not the case.
Well, maybe we'll come back and talk about reforming the business school, which is another project that we're interested in here. So let's wrap up for time, Mark. Send us those statistics, and we'll publish them. We'll try and summarize your 6 key points and some of the other points that you brought up here. Thank you for teaching us about the KFSO, the Kinetic Flow State Organization, and we'll keep looking for examples and seeing what's happening in the marketplace.
Well, I'm thankful for the time. You have been a great partner, and just full disclosure to everyone, this is something that you and I collaborated on and built jointly. So I give you full credit for working through the concepts of KFSOs and the diligence and the research and pulling it together over months and months of research and exploration and many debates. So thank you.
Good. Well, thank you, Mark, and we'll try and make it useful for people.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
This has been another episode of the Value Creators Podcast. Thanks for listening. You can visit thevaluecreators.com for links and resources related to this episode. Check hunterhastings.com for more content on entrepreneurial business management based on value creation principles.